I gotta say, my favorite part about YouTube and being a YouTuber is not all of the trendy content that fills this space. There's plenty of that, but over the years, YouTube has collected so much valuable information that it's pretty much become the encyclopedia for video. So at this point, you know we're all coming to YouTube to learn anything. But one thing I thought was missing, especially in the food space, was how to pick the proper stovetop or range. And as a pro home cook, you're gonna be making that decision at some point in your life, or maybe you just want more information on the range or stovetop that you're using. And I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to make this video because one, I'm a good cook, which is definitely important. I know what I'm doing, but more important than that, I have an induction burner in the studio. I have a gas burner at my house, and then at my in-laws place where I cook at all the time, they have an electric stovetop. So I've used these stovetops and I am very used to the way they work, the pros and cons, and that's what we're gonna be covering today. All of the elements of these stovetops, what makes them great, what makes them not so great, so you can make a proper decision on the perfect stovetop for you. So we're gonna start off with the induction stovetop because that's what I have in the studio. I figured we would start there, even though that's probably the most unusual stovetop because it's new technology. So first, let me explain a little bit of the technology. Each of these burners have a coiled copper wire, and when you pass an electric current through that copper, an electromagnetic field of energy is created. But that is only part one. Now you've got to get a pan that has some type of iron content in it. When you place that on the stove, the electromagnetic field passes through the coil into the pan and makes those iron molecules vibrate at an extremely high speed, causing friction, which creates energy directly into your food. And this is why a lot of people are starting to convert. They're starting to understand the efficiency of this stovetop. It's actually 90% efficient. So 90% of that energy created is going directly into your food, and only 10% of the energy is lost into the environment, which is amazing for your energy bill and just for the environment in general. The second pro is that the induction burner is by far the safest stovetop. Because of the way this stovetop works, you're not actually creating heat in the stovetop. So if I touch the stovetop after a pot comes off, it's only gonna be slightly hot from the residual heat built in the actual pan. So if some food falls on your burner or even a towel or a paper towel, it's not gonna burst into fire. You don't have to worry about that. At least for this stovetop, I can't guarantee that for all induction burners. But another feature that's really great for safety is that when you take your pan off the actual burner, the induction stove senses that there's no pan there, there's no energy transferring, and it will shut off automatically, which is amazing because I know I'm guilty of leaving a pan on the stove from time to time. It happens as a cook, at least with this brain right here. And just having that peace of mind that as long as a pan is not on the burner, I would be all right. The next pro, which is another reason why a lot of people are starting to look at induction, is just the ease of cleanup. We all know how difficult it is to clean a gas stove with all the things you got to take off and the nooks and crannies. Well, with an induction stove, because the stovetop cools very quickly, there's not much residual heat there, you can clean it right away, and also it's just a nice smooth glass surface. So you spray it down, you wipe it off, and it's as good as new. And the last pro of an induction burner, which is what most people already know about, is the extremely quick heat up time. So when it comes to heating up liquids like water or soup, it's incredible. You can bring food to a boil so fast. The saying of a watch pot never boils, it's eliminated with an induction burner because you can actually watch this pot boil pretty quickly. So for 2 cups of water in a little pot on the induction burner, you can see here, in just about a minute and a half, we came to a full boil, that's just crazy. So that's the pros, let's get into the cons. The first con that you just can't get away from right now at least is the price point. This is new technology. With all new technology comes a higher price point. Hopefully that will decrease over time. Another thing that's pretty annoying, especially for someone like me who films a lot in the kitchen, is a weird buzzing noise that happens when you put your induction on high heat. And I've seen a lot of people write in about this, so I think it's a generalized thing that happens with most induction burners that they just need to figure out. When this thing's on low heat, it's totally fine. But when you crank it up to a high heat, you run into this weird buzzing noise. Hopefully, like, those magnetic fields aren't going into my brain and it's just a noise. I can deal with that, but it's still annoying, especially when it comes to filming. So if you want a perfectly quiet stovetop, induction is not for you. The next con that scares a lot of people away from induction are the specific pots and pans that you need. So like I mentioned earlier, you need to have some iron content in your pots. So pots that have 100% aluminum or 100% copper, they're not going to work on this induction burner. But I can say that most new pots and pans on the market, they're making them specifically to work for induction because induction is getting much more popular. And also enamel pots, cast iron pots, those heavier pots, they're gonna work fine on this. So don't let it scare you away, but if you have like a specific set of pots that you just love and you don't wanna get rid of them or you don't wanna buy new pots, well then maybe induction is not right for you. So the last con, which needs to be resolved immediately. I can't speak for all induction burners, but I certainly get some hot spots, especially when I'm cooking at a high temperature. What I've noticed is that the middle of each pot or pan gets more heat, which is a bummer, because when you're cooking, you want that nice even heat. It's such an important part of getting great results with your food, especially at high temperatures when you're cooking something like meat, or say I'm frying up a flatbread. I don't want it burning in specific spots, or a pancake. I want it nice and even. So that needs to be resolved to really get this thing to the next level. Let's talk gas stove, and the first pro for me by far is just cooking with fire. It's just more fun. As human beings, that's how we developed. We figured out fire technology and we started cooking food with it, and it's hard for me to break away from that. It's just exciting to cook with fire, but some people, they don't like fire at all. They don't like the idea of it. I'm a bit of a pyro, but I think I'm a pyro because I'm a cook. I think those two things, they are deeply connected. So if you like cooking with fire, then definitely you're gonna want a gas stove. Number two is having unlimited temperature control, which is huge. You don't just have some buttons that say, okay, here's a range from 1 to 10, and you gotta be on one of those. With a gas stove, you've got a dial, and you can really dial it in to whatever temperature you want. So there's a whole range of settings, and you're in complete control of that temperature. Number three, which I think is a bit underrated, is having visual temperature control. So along with that unlimited temp control, well, we can actually see what is going on. You can get on that stove even if you've never used it, and you're still gonna be able to dial in pretty good because you can see exactly how big or small that flame is. When you're cooking on an electric or an induction stovetop and say you have a button that you're clicking, there could be some lag time. Since you can't see that flame, you don't know exactly how long it's taking to change temperatures. And when you have that instant temperature control and you can just turn it and boom, right away, the temperature is changed. That helps with consistency and cooking results. You know exactly where you're at, you can adjust in the moment, and you can feel confident with that adjustment. The next pro is that you can use any pot of any material and also any shape, and it's the only stovetop that can do both of those things. If you have a gas burner, that flame is going to hit your pot no matter what shape it is. So if you have a wok, for instance, and it comes to a point, well, you can still cook on a gas stove, or if your pot is rounded, a gas stove is really gonna be the only way to cook with a rounded type pot. The next pro is more of a personal preference. I can't guarantee this one for all gas stoves compared to other stovetops, but I find that when you cook at a high temperature on a gas stove, like when you're searing meat or you're stir frying some veggies, it's just a better cooking experience. It's a little easier to control that higher temperature, and I find I just get better results, especially when I'm searing up something like a steak. I have a much easier time getting a consistent crust compared to potentially burning something on another type of a stovetop. All right, so let's do the 2-cup boil test, and you can see here 2 cups in the gas stove. Takes a pretty good amount of time, just around 3 to 4 minutes to get to a nice full rolling boil. Cons of the gas stove, and the first one is that it's really not energy efficient at all. And this was pretty shocking to me when I first heard the stats. It's only 45% energy efficient, so that flame, it goes on, it hits the pan, but a lot of that energy, a lot of that heat is just being lost into the environment, not to mention the gas is also going to the environment as well. So it's going to heat up your kitchen, and also you'll have more just natural gas flowing throughout your kitchen. The second con is that it's probably the most dangerous. You know, we're cooking with fire, so there's gonna be some risks involved with a live flame. This isn't obviously a problem, but if safety is your number one concern, well, then maybe you should stay away from a gas stovetop because you can potentially burn yourself on the flame. The elements around them are heating up a lot through that flame, and you can burn yourself on the element. And also, when you have the gas hookup, there's potential for gas leaks. All right, the next con is that it's by far the hardest to clean. When you clean it, because you're probably not gonna clean it as much because it's a pain in the ass, you gotta take off all the pieces, clean all of those pieces, spray it down. There's all these nooks and crannies that you gotta get the food out of. It's just annoying to clean. So if you like a nice sparkly kitchen, you're a bit OCD, well then definitely get a stovetop that is glass and has a nice smooth surface. Another con that I've dealt with many times in my past, especially in the college days, is some gas burners just have a very weak flame. Like you can't get them on a high heat. Whereas induction, no matter what, you're gonna be able to get that thing pumping. Electric, there can be some pretty shitty electric stoves, but with gas, you know, I've dealt with many gas stove tops that the high flame is like a low flame. And that's no fun because you can't really get cooking. So that could be a potential depending on your gas stove. And one final thing that I've run into, which is definitely not a concern with all gas stoves, but sometimes the low setting is not low enough. When you turn it all the way down, you're still boiling your food. And sometimes I just want a nice simmer or just to keep something gently warming and the flame is just a little bit too high. Only happens with specific stoves, but I've definitely run into that issue, so something to look into. Finally, the electric stove, and there's two main types of electric stove. You have the old school style with the coil, and then you have the newer electric stoves that are just the flat glass surface. I'm using for this demonstration one of the newer electric stoves with just the glass surface. So the first pro is energy efficiency. It's coming in at around 75% efficient, so not as efficient as the induction burner, but still pretty good, better than gas. You're not gonna be losing so much energy into just the air. Number two is easy cleaning again. This only goes for the flat glass surface. The coils, that's a different story, but when you have a flat glass surface, of course, just like the induction burner, it's very easy to clean. The next pro is the price point. If you are looking for a cleaner look in your kitchen, a nice flat surface, well, this is going to be the best option compared to an induction burner, which is gonna be at least 30% more in cost. So if price is very important, think about an electric stovetop. The last pro is precision, and this definitely comes with a learning curve, but what I found with electric stoves is that over time, I start to master them and it becomes pretty easy to use and very precise. Whether you have a dial from 1 to 10 or whatever it is, you start to really tune into those numbers and you know exactly what they're gonna get. It's kind of like a shower, where if you're using a shower for the first time, just a smidge to the left is gonna like be steaming hot, but eventually you learn exactly where your shower head needs to be for the perfect temperature. That's how I feel about electric stoves. Over time, you can get a really nice, precise cook from just tuning in and using it over and over again. So moving on to cons. Electric is generally the slowest heat up time. It just takes a lot of energy to get something very hot. You can see the 2-cup boil test. Yes, it came in at the worst time, which is pretty standard for electric stoves. So if you want things to heat up very quickly, electric stoves are not the way to go. The next con is a slower response time. So for the gas stove, we had the exact opposite, a quick response time, but when it comes to an electric stove, when you are dialing in those numbers, sometimes it takes some time to kick into that proper heat, which can be a bit frustrating depending on the stovetop that you're using, but I don't love waiting for that heat to kick in. I like that instantaneous response time. So the next con is that you need flat bottom pans. So a pan like this, it's rounded on the side, and then the bottom is completely a flat surface. So if your pan is slightly warped, you're gonna run into a lot of issues because you don't have that flat contact, that full surface area contact, and you're just gonna be losing a lot of energy from the burner. So flat bottom pans, mandatory. They sell a lot of these types now, which is great, but of course it's nice to not need a pan that has to be flat. When you're cooking at really high heat and you can't see what's going on and you have that slow response time, well, you might burn your food because all of a sudden you're searing your meat and it's way too high, and then you're like, oh, no, let me click it down, but it takes too long, and then boom, your food's already burnt. So high temperature cooking can be a bit tough on electric stovetops. And then finally, some electric stovetops can be weak, especially those old school coil ones. This is certainly not the case for all stovetops. This stovetop that I'm working off of is really great, but I have found some electric stovetops to be a bit weak. So maybe you clicked on this video because you're currently buying a stovetop, or maybe you just want more information on your current stovetop. Again, these are just my opinions, my thoughts, information I've collected over the years. Well, if it really came down to it, I would be cooking outside over real fires, but that's not realistic. So I think it would go gas, then induction. Induction has so much potential. I love this stove for so many reasons, but I feel like they just need to work out a little bit of that technology and just keep going. And then electric for me is number 3. But if you're interested in the cheaper ranges in stovetops, maybe you want to go with electric. And make sure you comment in below with your own thoughts. I'm sure you have your own opinions from stovetops that you have used. I want to see that information in the comment section. And if you like this video, click on this video right here. I put the Breville Pizzaiola to the test. It's another tech video, that thing back there. And I tested it out to see if it was the greatest pizza maker ever. So check out that video to see the results.